Zach Cregger is an incredibly talented filmmaker that hopped onto the horror scene 3 years ago after quietly leaving the comedy scene in the 2010s. He was in a prolific sketch comedy group, The Whitest Kids You Know, but for his horror genre, he popped out of nowhere, being very similar to Jordan Peele, where he just showed up with a great film. His first film in 2022, Barbarian, was so great that he ended up having one of the largest meteoric rises for any horror director. He instantly rose to fame in the horror industry, and it's so cool to see a brand new voice just appear out of nowhere in horror. It's one of my favorite things. So with his latest film, Weapons, coming out, I wanted to look at Zach Cregger and his last two films and what makes them and Zach Cregger as a new horror writer and director and voice so special. Out of the gate, the thing that makes Cregger stand out compared to other horror contemporaries is how Cregger is so good at coming up with new concepts. This is what puts every horror director kind of in their own category. This is why you know people like Ari Aster or Robert Eggers, or the filmmaker I think who was closest to Cregger, Jordan Peele. And just like Peele, Cregger comes up with these incredible concepts. His first film he directed by himself was Barbarian, which released in 2022. On paper, you look at it and it's a good little twist on the haunted house film. But Barbarian is so strong of a concept because it takes the original concept of a creepy house and plays the modern version of it, with the film being about the horror of staying on your own in a house you don't know, rented from Airbnb. A concept a lot of us have had to deal with, and a horror that kind of has always been underlying in our lives, but no film has explored it fully. Cregger is incredible at prying on the fears of stuff that has emerged in the modern age. Cregger instantly weaponizes that fear of these new concepts and the new modern age that moves faster than ever, that plays off the fear of, the best part about horror, the unknown. His second film that came out this last weekend, Weapons, does the exact same thing. It's a story about a whole classroom of children that got out of bed at 2:17, walked outside their house, and never came back. Even though all of these houses have modern technology, Ring cameras, they still aren't able to figure out where all these kids went. This time Cregger is also looking at the horror of a modern issue that a lot of people don't like talking about. And it's about the mass loss of children in a community, which in a modern age is something we have to deal with more and more, especially in America, when it comes to the rise of statistical school shootings. This is a horrifying concept that not a lot of us like to look at or have to deal with. And Weapons, though, wants to look at it. It looks at the mass trauma and how one classroom can infect an entire community, and how that pain and trauma ends up snowballing onto other people as people end up getting more violent and angry as it infects everyone. It's such a smart and unique way to look at trauma and death and loss, and it's a horror concept that I've never seen work this well before, because it's playing on that fear of losing a child in a way I've never seen. And that's what makes Cregger stand out so uniquely. His screenplays that he's writing, while they might play on conventions we know about, they stand out because his narratives are always structured differently than any modern horror film. He may have been inspired or taken things from other films, but when he remixes it with his own style, it's something you've never seen before. Barbarian stands out so much as a horror film because at the 40-minute mark, it hard cuts to a brand new character and starts the story over. For a film you think is just going to be a haunted house film, that is such a unique and bold idea to change that story, and it is so much more exciting if you're reading the script and you want to produce it. Who takes a swing like this in their first feature film? Well, Cregger does. And the movie is all the better for it because it's allowing the creativity of Cregger to run wild. He also does that with his new structure in the film Weapons. I don't think this is that big of a spoiler because I think a lot of people have talked about it, but the film is structured like Magnolia, where it's following a lot of separate characters in different chapters, and as we see each character's perspective through hypersubjectivity, we're able to understand what's going on in this town better and see the different sides of the town. What this allows Cregger to do is really get into these characters' heads until they all intersect at the end, and makes a horror film really focus about the characters that are at the center of this horrifying concept and trauma. But because these films are so groundbreaking and different with their structure and style, sometimes they do run into pacing issues that traditional 3-act films aren't going to run into. But even with those issues, I think these type of stories are so unique and groundbreaking, it will keep you engaged more than a traditional film. Alongside making these films as a screenplay really easy to sell because the premises are so unique, and reading them with the structure they have is super fun. Weapons had an insane bidding war when it came to people trying to buy the script so they could end up producing it. There's no other film that has taken this many chances with its story and structure, and you can tell that Hollywood is clamoring at something this unique. $40 million for a horror film? What is happening? And Jordan Peele couldn't afford it? What that showed us was that Cregger is a voice in Hollywood that they realize is unique, and that he's making stuff that no one else can make outside of like Jordan Peele. Zach Cregger is doing the one thing that Hollywood is always looking for but scared to do. He's pushing the genre forward. I remember seeing the trailer for the new Conjuring in the theater when I was waiting for Weapons, and I just thought to myself, this franchise feels like a dinosaur. It feels so old and dilapidated at this point. that we're just doing scares with no real characters at the center. These films are more roller coasters than films at this point. And then I watched Weapons instantly after, and I saw a film that was focused on character with the horror in the background. And it's a film I haven't been able to stop thinking about. And the reason that Cregger's films keep sticking with you for years is because of the characters at the center of them. For as great as Cregger's unique structure and story premises are, his characters at the center of the film are what give his horror films such a unique heart. Like, look at the title for Barbarian. That title is applying to multiple characters within the film, and it's because the film is centered around the characters. He creates these nuanced and pretty regular people at the center of these films that we want to see make it out. Bill Skarsgård's character in Barbarian is one of the most layered and unique characters that I've seen in a film, because he feels so creepy, but he's just desperately trying to be normal. The characters in Weapons are so engaging because they feel like normal people that are dealing with trauma. Josh Brolin is a jerk, but he's not trying to be one. It's just that he's gone through so much, you have to empathize with him and understand that he's making mistakes. And when you're so engaged with these characters, like Alden Ehrenreich's cop character in Weapons, it ends up making the horror in the film that much scarier. Now, let's talk about the main reason why we all love Zach Cregger's films. These films are creepy. I know this is completely subjective and anecdotal, but there's very few filmmakers that get under my skin with their films like Cregger does. Weapons isn't that scary of a film, but the moments where it does lean into the horror with the eerie doors opening, people walking around creepily, it just gets under my skin, man. It is so good. And that's because he understands that horror comes from incredible setup and payoffs rather than cheap jump scares. Zach Cregger, like the horror masters that came before him, understands the power of tension and the power of empty spaces. When there isn't something there, but something feels like it should be, that is scarier than any monster we can think of. And Cregger just loves to play in that space. He's so good at it. Just like Jordan Peele, Zach Cregger came from a comedy background, and that helps him when he's creating these horror scenes. Comedy and horror are way more similar than you think. They basically have the exact same setup. Both of them are setting up either a punchline or a scare. And the punchline of it, whether it's the joke or the scare, needs to be perfect with the timing or it won't land. A second early or a second too late in a film like these can break the horror of a scene or end up making it so freaky you remember it for years to come. And what he does so well is get us to lean in for the payoff of something he's setting up. Cregger is never rushing to get us scared. He always wants the tension to slowly build until we have this intense dread where we know something horrible is about to happen. I don't think the monster in Barbarian shows up until like 40 minutes into the film, and it's just as creepy even though there's no jump scares. And Cregger does my favorite thing horror directors can do. Sometimes he sets up a scene where you think there's going to be a jump scare. He pans to an open area and you're waiting for the scare, you're leaning in, and then he just lets the scene play out and there's not a scare, leaving you a feeling that something should have happened. And that ends up making the next scare so much freakier because now we have this dread looming in the back of our head that something should have happened and didn't, and oh my gosh! Cregger is so good at building up these characters in tension with such good premises, you wonder, maybe he might be one of the best filmmakers ever when it comes to horror. And honestly, he's getting there. The problem with me, at least the only knock I have on Cregger, is his endings. Barbarian is my favorite horror film of 2022 until they leave the house. Weapons is the best horror film I had seen this year behind Sinners until they got to Chapter Alex. Both films in the third act end up shifting tones and move away from the claustrophobic setup that they have, and we end up going for larger, bigger third acts that fall in line more with action and comedy than horror. And that makes sense. Cregger says one of his biggest inspirations is writers like Stephen King. Both of them are writers that end up finding the story as they start. Cregger said when he started writing Weapons, he had the premise and not the ending. Totally fine, a totally normal way to do it. Sometimes though, that does lead to audiences having their own idea of what should happen, and Cregger finds a different ending that he wants to do. Cregger says to him that finding a story is like digging up a dinosaur. You're finding it one bone at a time. And by the end of it, once you've discovered all the bones, you know what type of dinosaur you found. Sometimes though, for the rest of the audience, we see the first thing, we see sharp teeth, and we go, oh, this is a T-Rex, and by the end, it's like we got an Ankylosaurus. It's like, alright, it's kind of different than what I thought. It's still cool, but it's not what I wanted. But even if you don't like the final end product at the end of these films, or how you don't like how the ending went, the way that Cregger finds these premises and stories are so unique and so original, I don't really care if they go off the rails in the last 30 minutes, because the first 2/3 are so good that I wouldn't want to trade it for the world. Cregger's films are so masterfully crafted from a writing and directing standpoint that you're just enchanted by them from start to finish if you're a horror fan. Cregger has created a name for himself as a visionary director that just has an incredibly strong voice, and like the best writer-directors that came before him, he has the one thing that most people in Hollywood don't have, and that's a vision. As long as Cregger keeps finding these incredible stories in the sand and digging them up, he'll end up being a horror name that'll be remembered not just for this decade, but for the decades to come. And he's also making a Resident Evil movie. Where'd everyone go? Bingo night? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.